Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Sociastrology. Today I wanted to go through the houses that will be hit in each of your charts based on the outer planets that are going to be moving into new signs. We are going to have Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus all moving into new signs starting in 2025, and then they will move in permanently in 2026 and stay there for an extended period of time. Uranus is going to stay in Gemini until 2032. Neptune will stay in Aries until 2039, and Pluto will stay in Aquarius until 2043. So these are going to be long periods of your life where these planets are transiting various houses through your chart. And I wanted to kind of combine all of these energies and give you a bit of an overview of what to expect from the coming decade or two in your own life. So let's go ahead and dive in. Today we will also consider the fact that Jupiter will be in Leo throughout this time as well, as a kind of little area to help us out with the early energy of this as we are kind of dipping our toes into these new signs. So I will consider those as well as the kind of initial energy. So if you're looking for 2026 in particular, then this will be with you and it'll be helping you. So let's go through it. I'll start with Aries and go around to Pisces Rising. Let's get into it. If you enjoy this video, please do give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. It helps me out with the algorithm. It helps the channel to grow. And it also lets me know that you enjoy the video, and that means a lot to me. So yeah, if you don't mind, I would very much appreciate that. And yeah, if you like content like this, of these broader long-term transits, as well as geopolitical astrology and political astrology, then please do feel free to hit the subscribe button and stick around for future videos. I would love to have you here. But yeah, let's get into it. So starting with Aries, what we have here is Uranus is in the third house, Neptune is in the first house, and Pluto is in the 11th house. So one thing that we will see with this is new groups of people. We may see some disruptions in relationships with people that you deal with day to day, siblings and neighbors and kind of local interactions, people that you deal with maybe in your work life and so forth. Those relationships may be disrupted in different ways. You may have some of those relationships end rather suddenly, but you'll also have new people come in as well rather suddenly. You may also find that your communication style has somewhat changed. You may be communicating significantly more because with Aries Rising, all of your houses are falling in their natural signs. So it's kind of doubling down on the Gemini energy here with Uranus. So you may find that you find it kind of easier to communicate everything that you're wanting to say. You may be communicating a lot more openly, which shouldn't be an issue for you as an Aries rising, but you know, it should come out. I wouldn't necessarily say more smoothly, but there's more of an urge to communicate completely. And you may also have some definite disruptions with technology and communications and things like this. I would also be pretty careful about short trips, so watch out for accidents while commuting. Do everything that you can to make sure that your commute is safe. I do personally believe that certain events can be somewhat avoided if we're watching out for them and we are kind of counterbalancing them. Now, let's see, what else do I have for this? You could, like I said, be kind of especially susceptible. This is going to represent communication breakdowns, so outages and things like this with power and software glitches and internet outages and things like this that break down the communication. You may be especially susceptible to this because it's also in your third house. So keep that in mind. There may be also a focus on getting involved with some groups of a social humanitarian bent. And one thing that I would kind of keep in mind with that is to not be manipulated or dominated within the context of any of those groups that you may be involved with Pluto in the 11th house here. it does bring a certain really deep-seated emphasis upon society and social concerns for you, as well as associates and people like this. But it is important with Pluto to understand that the power goes both ways. And so, if you do feel like you're being manipulated or leaned on, or that you just kind of have a weird feeling about some group that you're involved with, I would really lean into your intuition on that. Your intuition will be pretty strong with Neptune in the first house, but there is also here a bit of an energy of dissolution of the self within the context of a broader group. So that is something to watch out for, because I think that your sense of self it ebbs and flows in, I think, a kind of interesting way. I feel like there may be a sense of feeling up and down about yourself throughout this time. And I wouldn't worry about that too much. I would try and find a balance there. But when you're feeling a little down on yourself, do try and remember that Neptune is in your first house, and it's deceiving you a bit about yourself, and it can tend toward the negation. And so because it's in the first house, you can be a little bit negative on yourself. So I would try to lean more toward, as long as you're not puffing yourself up too unhealthily, with Neptune in the first house in Aries, which could definitely also be another extreme with this. But as long as you're not doing that, then I would lean toward feeling positive about yourself. What else do we have here? There is an increased tendency to daydream as well. The first house can be a lot of what you focus on, and with Neptune here, you may find yourself daydreaming. That is one thing that I would watch out for a lot with like commuting and stuff like that, is that there could be an avoidable accident that could be a little bit encouraged by not paying full attention to what's going on around you. There's something strong here again about the influence of society over you and your situation that's arising here. So that may be also part of why you're driven to get involved with social groups, is to ameliorate some of the ill effects of society as it exists today upon individuals. And I'm hoping that this is more leaning in the direction of you becoming more aware of it and getting more involved in it, than necessarily that it's feeling a lot more heavy. But if it does start to feel heavy, if you start to feel like you don't have control over your life and your circumstances, I would kind of lean away from that, and definitely try and really focus on the fact that you do have control, you do have some power, you do have personal individual agency. This is a concept that comes up. I'll just go into sociology a bit, since this is Pluto in the 11th house. I'll go into it a little bit. Some of these kind of concepts that are really predominant in sociology is around the impacts and the power that society has over individuals and their choices, and then therefore their behaviors. But there's also this kind of counterbalance of individual agency that is also something that sociologists try and continually remind themselves, is that individuals do make their own choices, and they can deviate from the norm. So even though there's some sort of behavior that's expected of you from society, if it feels oppressive or whatever, you can deviate from that. And in the sociological context, deviation isn't considered being bad. Deviation doesn't mean bad. It means different. It means, going outside of that, basically, that norm. So you can utilize your agency to step out of some of the kind of social structures that are feeling maybe a little bit like they're overpowering you during this time. And just try and remind yourself of that. Like a sociologist, always try and keep that in the back of your mind, even as you're dealing with social issues that do have a strong impact on people in general. With Jupiter in the 5th house in the initial part of this throughout 2026 and into 2027, this should help out a lot in terms of making social interactions more enjoyable. This should also bring to your attention some sort of creative outlet, possibly since it is in opposition to this Pluto. This may have to do with some sort of organizing or something that you are feeling that you're able to express yourself within this, within a fun way and an enjoyable way, but also a way that is making you feel more empowered. With Jupiter and Leo in the 5th, this is an empowered energy. And it's also a very charismatic and likable energy. So you may be in a more healthy way, especially in the beginning. And so I would try and take some lessons from this, deriving some sense of empowerment from your involvement with these groups. But basically, this is a really wonderful place for joy and for interactions with people, also romantic interactions, and interactions with children and so forth. It's a really great placement for Jupiter. It's one of the best places basically to have it. So you should be able to really enjoy, especially 2026, 2027. And then as we move into Jupiter moving into Virgo, then you'll probably be getting maybe more into the details of all of this stuff that you're getting involved with here. But yeah, it looks very interesting and dynamic here. The only thing I would caution against is any sort of real self-doubt. If you are, again, creating a bit of cult of personality around yourself, I would really watch out for that because there could be some blowback for that. But other than that, I would definitely try to feel really strong and empowered during this time. But yeah, otherwise it's a very good placement for you. Okay, so for Taurus Rising, we are going to have Uranus in the 2nd house. We'll have Neptune in the 12th house and Pluto in the 10th house. We'll also discuss Jupiter in the 4th house here. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that there may be a little bit of uncertainty with regard to your career wherein you make your income. And it's likely not only a job shift, but maybe a career shift in terms of focus. And it will probably, with Neptune in the 12th house here, especially during this year when Saturn is also with Neptune, this may bring up some fears, but try and go with these changes because they're trying to bring you in a better direction here, something that you feel like fits a little bit better. This could be represented by a bit of a shock to the income or to the resources, or a revelation of resources that you didn't know you had, or it could simply indicate choosing to become more independent within one's career in terms of empowering yourself and being independent within your own career with Pluto in Aquarius in your 10th house. But there's something that's really changing here with regard to your standing in the world and your income. And this is why, when someone says something like that, it can be scary. This shouldn't be scary. These are changes that are necessary and they can be really good. Uranus in the 2nd, it does have to do with ups and downs with regard to your income. So maybe extra money comes in, but then maybe an expense comes up. There's a bit of a kind of back and forth when it comes to the income here. But when it does rise, just try and, put that into savings and keep it for a rainy day. Because there will be some things that pop up during this time. And if you're choosing to change careers, you may also want to squirrel some of those resources away that will come up in fits and starts. So you will come into small and medium size and maybe even big windfalls throughout this time. Try and squirrel some of that away because of the fact that if you're transforming your career here, you may want to have a little bit of wiggle room to either take a bit of a smaller income to start something out, or you may want to start working fewer hours within what you thought was a career, but then you're kind of transitioning into having just be your job while you're starting something else that's independent. Things like this can come up. So when you do get those little windfalls, just, scroll them away. Just try not to burn through them as quickly as you get them. Again, with Neptune in the 12th, there's a bit of fear, and do watch out with Neptune in the 12th for overindulgence in somewhat toxic substances and things like this, and try not to. Here's one way I could see this playing out would be relying on, like, for instance, the concept of manifestation to bring you what it is that you're wanting without thinking that, and I know that this is going to sound strange to a Taurus rising because it is, but without taking the steps that are necessary. You do want to be active with all of this. With Pluto in the 12th, or with Pluto in the 10th and Uranus in the 2nd here, and then with Jupiter in the 4th as well, you do want to take an active role here. So you should be able to rely on those kind of concepts of manifestation and so forth. Your focus should be really helpful, and this should kind of thin the veil a bit between the energies that you're able to call on. But I wouldn't rely on it fully, because this is, as much as it's a spiritual energy and it's in a spiritual house, and it can help, it can be really helpful in that sense, but it can also be a little bit deceptive and something that you rely on a little bit too much. So that's just a little bit of a warning with that. But otherwise, during 2026 and into 2027, we will see Jupiter in your 4th house here. And what's really nice about this in the context of some of these changes that are going to be new during this time and that you'll be processing through in the coming decade and so, is that you should be finding that your foundation, the actual foundation that you're working with, is really solid. So you're not starting from scratch here. Even if you're changing careers, even if you are moving money around and changing your sources, your streams of income and so forth, you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from a really solid, beneficial foundation here. And you should also be able to rely on some sort of foundation of people that feel like family, that are also willing to help you with any gaps that might pop up throughout all of this. So I would also, if you're looking to change career and you're not quite sure, I would tap into those who are closest to you for information and so forth, because you should be able to get a lot of benefits out of those in your home, your family, and those you consider to be your family and associated with your roots throughout this time. So you should be able to get those little information bits and pieces that are sparks for you to pursue a path that maybe you hadn't considered. So that is most of what I'm seeing for you during this time, Taurus. It looks pretty good. Just try not to worry too much, because especially for Taurus rising, I'm sure that you enjoy, stability, and that change is not always super welcome, but do know that these changes are working for you. They're trying to, these two planets are working together in a way that feels super unstable. But because they're working together, they're trying to bring you to something that's better for you. And for you, it's about your career and your income. And so I know that can be a little scary, but try not to lean into that too much. All right, so for my fellow Taurus rising people here, what we're going to see is Uranus will be in our 1st house. Neptune will be in our 11th house, and Pluto will be in our 9th house. And then during this period of time this year, from mid-2026 to mid-2027, Jupiter will be in our 3rd house. So let's go through this. There's a fundamental change here to the way that you view and portray yourself, as well as how you see your place in the world, with Uranus in the 1st and Pluto in the 9th here. There's a transformation of worldview and a transformation of self. And so the way that you see yourself in interaction with the world is going to be really, really fundamental, and it's going to be sharply changing in the coming years. And I think in a much better way, because we just went through, and I'm going to talk about this more in the Cancer video, sadly, for the Cancer risings, but We just went through some rough transits, and let me just point this out real quick, because as a fellow Gemini rising, like, I need to commiserate with you for a moment. We just went through Pluto in our 8th house, Neptune in our 10th, and Uranus in our 12th. Uranus in the 12th isn't so bad, but to have Pluto in the 8th and Neptune in the 10th, that was a really weird time. And probably, especially if you have any planets in Capricorn, you probably experienced some additional impact than the usual kind of COVID story during that time. It was probably kind of especially weird and rough. The energies are getting a lot lighter. And I mean, obviously, as a Gemini rising, I really love to see this. But so there's a fundamental, complete change in how you're viewing the world, as opposed to the past 15 years, essentially, with Pluto in the 8th. Now, there's also, again, a transformation of the belief system with Pluto in the 9th. And this is, again, to kind of bring this into alignment. These planets are working together to transform different areas of our lives. And this is bringing this into alignment with sudden shifts and changes in your own attitudes and behaviors with Uranus in the 1st. You may find with Neptune in the 11th that people kind of mysteriously leave and enter your life, and that your alliances and your affiliations, your associates, kind of they ebb and flow in these kind of mysterious ways. Now, if people disappear, it might not be for good. You know, they might just mysteriously kind of wander back into your life at some other point as well. And another thing with this is that there may be assistance that comes to you from alliances and associates and so forth, friends and groups that you belong to, that, again, kind of seems to come out of nowhere in a rather mysterious way. And you may also find yourself involved with more kind of groups of a spiritual bent with Neptune in the 11th as well. And there may be also during this first couple of years of this, probably starting in 2025 when Saturn moved into Aries as well, there may be a bit of a reorientation or like a diminution. Sorry. Sorry, I was struggling with that word really hard. A diminution of some existing relationships with Saturn in the 11th, or they may become at least a little bit more serious in some way with Saturn in the 11th as well. So some, in the beginning, relationships will probably wind up leaving your life. These two planets can be planets of separation, especially when taken together, as well as they can be planets together of sacrifice. And so you may feel the need to sacrifice also some sense of yourself for the greater good with these two together in the 11th house. But Saturn will be moving on, and it'll move into your 12th. And Saturn in the 12th isn't so so out there with what it's taking away and so forth. So another thing with Neptune in the 11th, and one thing that I would caution about any sort of potential sacrifices that you might make for groups, is that this can be quite idealistic. It can also be deceived. So within the context of groups, try not to be too idealistic about them, and try not to be too idealistic about society. Because, again, you could be deceived about you may misunderstand, let me put it that way, some aspect of what you're sacrificing yourself for. So really kind of think that through and make sure that, especially with Neptune, that intuitively, I mean, Neptune can even mislead you a little bit when it comes to your intuition, but really feel into a situation and try and make sure that it really feels right before you start making any real sacrifices for groups of people or for society broadly. This could also, these two together could indicate an increased activity in charity work or social work in general. Now, for us, we're going to have Jupiter in the third, which is pretty nice, especially for Gemini Rising. This should bring in new groups of people. Your social life will probably be increasing by fits with Uranus in the first and then with Jupiter in the third here. Your social group and your acquaintances and so forth should be increasing. You may also find a higher quality of people, and I hate to put it that way, but that's, that is true. So you may find yourself with a higher quality of people around you as well that you're dealing with on the day to day. And you'll also be heard a lot more, and people will react to what you're saying in a better way than usual with Jupiter in the third. This can also increase the kind of speed of your life with Jupiter in the third. So tons of communications. You might be protected. I feel like typically with Jupiter transits, it tends to protect an area of your life as well. So you may be somewhat protected from some of the disruptive outages and communication breakdowns and so forth that we will as a society be experiencing. Hopefully you won't be losing data or things like this because of the fact that Jupiter is in your third house. You may even feel, intuitive hits about, oh, maybe I shouldn't upload a bunch of data that I really need to this particular cloud or whatever, and then maybe they have some sort of data loss, and because of the fact that you felt that way, then you're protected from that. So do kind of keep in mind the disruptions of the technology and everything, because it's in your first house, so it can come up, but there's this protective energy here with Jupiter in the third that should help you out quite a bit. Again, I do want to emphasize this kind of speeding up energy. You may be taking a lot more short trips. You may be socializing a lot more. You might also find yourself, how do I put this? It's like the length of your commute may grow. The length of the time that you spend socializing. It's not just more socializing, but the length of time that you spend doing that in a given go may increase. Everything that has to do with communication, socialization, you may find that you have more neighbors. So you may wind up moving to a place where you used to have just 5 people around you, and now there's 20 people who kind of cross your path in terms of, from your door to your car or whatever. You may also have more people around you when it comes to work, but all of this is going to be beneficial to you. So if you're strongly introverted, it may be a little bit overwhelming, but what we see here is a benefit anyway, so try and lean into it. Also, especially because if you feel like you're awkward because you're introverted in terms of your communication is going to go over really well. And again, there's this kind of can't be messed with protector that's in this house. So I really wouldn't worry about the way that your communications are coming off. Obviously, don't be too jerky, because with Uranus in the first, you're going to be coming off a little bit differently. But there is this, what you say going over well, what you communicate, your communications. You should be also pretty protected. I don't want to give you too much confidence when it comes to on the road, but in terms of your commute and so forth, your daily route and your daily tasks, and I wouldn't say your habits so much, but the standard day-to-day stuff that you do, you should be quite protected in that during this time. So it looks really great. It certainly looks so much better than what we've been dealing with for the past 15 years, and then especially the past 7 years or so. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We should all, have a little everything's moving out of our rough houses party coming up. Okay, so for Cancer Rising here, we have Uranus in the 12th house We have Neptune in the 10th house, and we have Pluto in the 8th house. We'll also discuss Jupiter in the 2nd house here. Now, I don't want to scare you. If you know anyone with Gemini Rising, I would talk to them about this transit. I have Gemini Rising, so I can speak from experience of this and hopefully give you some insight that on a level I had, but if I had been told by someone, with, say, Taurus Rising about what to expect from this transit before it happened, then it probably would have helped me out a lot. So, one thing we're going to be seeing here, we have Pluto in the 8th and Neptune in the 10th here, and these can be relatively nebulous energies. Now, Pluto in the 8th isn't all that terrible, but when we do get pileups in Aquarius for you, it can feel really overwhelming. And try not to feel like during those times that everything is simply falling apart. If things are falling apart, it's for a reason. It's because Pluto's trying to transform a situation, and it has little helpers and friends during Aquarius season, for instance, to help it to do that. Otherwise, it stays relatively quiet here. It's just when you get those pileups, then it can get really intense. So that's something to keep in mind for Aquarius season going forward until 2043, essentially, is that when this guy has helpers to reach kind of directly into your life with the inner planets, it will, and it'll change some things. It's ultimately for the good. I will say, in hindsight, these transits are really great because they reorient you, but when you're going through it, it can feel a little overwhelming. So again, if you have any friends with Gemini Rising, then I would definitely lean on them to be like, hey, you know what? It's okay. It's going to be okay. It's just intense is all. Now, with Neptune in the 10th, one thing that we will see is you're probably going to feel slightly aimless, or like you keep getting taken down. What's that kind of idiom? I have no idea what it is. Taken down the garden path, I think is what it is. I think I just thought of it. So you may feel like you're being taken down the garden path or whatever. During this time where you kind of start off in one direction, and then that kind of leads you to this kind of realization that you want to go into a different direction. And basically what this will kind of be building toward is a much more holistic perspective of what it is that you want to do with your life and what you feel like your purpose is. So this can come through where you pick up little pieces here and there, but you wind up kind of changing routes a little bit here and there as well, and that could potentially drive you a little bit crazy, especially with Cancer Rising. I would be very compassionate with yourself about any changes that are going on through this time, because they're meant to happen without a doubt, and they're leading you somewhere. So try not to focus too much on the destination that you feel like you're aiming toward at the beginning of this, because the destination will change, and that's fine, but you're picking up important pieces of the puzzle essentially along the way, and you'll have a complete picture more so toward the end of this transit. Now, another thing that I do want to point out with Pluto in the 8th is that this can represent a rather strong susceptibility to manipulations. So I would recommend, with Pluto in the 8th, you can do research, and do your research on issues of the types of people that tend to manipulate and what their tactics are. Definitely look into these kind of dark triad personality types and, narcissism and so forth. I would definitely recommend watching some of what Dr. Ramani says about this topic, so that you are armed and prepared if you haven't already encountered that, because that can be something that pops up when you have Pluto in the 8th here. And that is one of the scarier aspects that can come up with this, is just a blind spot. The 8th house can represent a blind spot. The 12th house can as well as the 6th and the 2nd. But this can represent a blind spot, and the planet of power dynamics and manipulations is moving through it. And so try to, forewarned is forearmed is what I'm really hoping to achieve with talking to you guys about this transit. Because if you're ready, then you can see things ahead of time. So definitely try not to wear rose-colored glasses during this time, but try not to put a damper on everything. But just try and, keep your eyes open for that kind of thing to potentially pull you onto a little bit of a weird and not pleasant kind of detour there. Now, with Uranus in Gemini in the 12th here, those detours are going to happen. There's going to be, probably a lot of, quote, divine detours that you wind up finding yourself involved with. There may be some psychic shocks, like intuitive hits and things like this coming through during this time. You may find that you have some intuitive abilities that you weren't quite aware of before, and they'll probably come through rather suddenly in these kind of, like in Zen Buddhism, the belief tends to be that you can essentially reach a state of Zen or a state of like nirvana, where it comes through in fits and starts. Like it'll happen in a moment, and then the next moment you may have a bit of memory of how that went, but it then kind of goes into the background again. So you may feel like some of that is coming through for you. There may also be along similar lines, a spark of interest that arises around certain topics of synchronicities or spiritual work or healing work, anything of a kind of 12th house, kind of compassionate work as well, and work in isolation. You'll probably be alone when you get these little sparks of insight and so forth with this in the 12th house. But you may also feel these sparks of interest come up around some of these topics as well. This is one thing I will point out. This alignment is wonderful if you are trying to get involved in a spiritual career. But when it comes to like teachers and gurus and things like this, I would just, watch out a little bit for manipulations that you might not be fully aware of. It could be quite shocking with Uranus in the 12th and then with Pluto in the 8th here. Just forewarned is forearmed, Now, during this little time from 2026 to 2027, we have Jupiter in the 2nd house. So your income should be fine. Your income should be actually really solid and providing you a really nice little foundation from which to work with all of this kind of changing energy. I would recommend saving as much as you can of the increased resources that you're going to be seeing during this time. That way you have more wiggle room for any sort of changes that you may have coming up in the coming years. That way you're more in control of those changes, because you can choose to, for instance, step out of certain situations and go toward some other situations where you might not necessarily have a full income lined up yet with those. Then you should be able to have a little bit of a savings to rely on so that you have that freedom. Another little one possibility with this, and I wouldn't want to scare you at all, but just mentioning, with Pluto in the 8th opposite to Jupiter in the 2nd, especially also with the connections to Neptune in the 10th, and then, of course, Uranus in the 12th here, this could indicate some sort of inheritance that's giving you a level of freedom and is making you think like, oh, okay, well, if I don't necessarily have to full on worry about my income all the time, then I might want to reconsider, my career or whatnot. And this could come as some sort of kind of surprise shock that this would happen. It won't happen that way for everyone. There's something here about control of resources, and it's really excellent that we have Jupiter in the second house dealing with this here. So this axis is really important, the eighth house and the second house. And it looks like, especially in the beginning, it's to your benefit, but I would definitely take those specific recommendation kind of referral that I gave and check that out, just so that you're forewarned about the worst aspect of this. And that is the worst aspect of it, is just being susceptible to manipulations by people is the worst that comes out of this, I will say. So it's not terrible. It's just that when that comes up, it's really not fun. Okay, so Leo Rising. Let's see what we have here for you. We have Uranus in the 11th house. We have Neptune in the 9th house, which is pretty lovely. And we have Pluto in the 7th house here. We also have Jupiter in the 1st during this 2026 to 2027 time frame here. So there is a major shift in how you relate to others here and with whom you are relating. So close relationships will be transforming during this time, and it may be due to something that you learn about how others have managed to manipulate you, with Pluto in the 7th house of others here. And this would likely be early in the transit, because we do have, with Pluto in the 1st opposing this, there's a huge benefit here. And if you haven't learned this lesson before, it is really beneficial for you to learn it. And so I could see that happening early on. And it may feel like it's a really upsetting, stupid thing to have to deal with. And it is, but it's for your benefit to learn about that. If you aren't fully aware of what I'm talking about, then it'll probably come up early on. And if you are dealing with crappy people, try and remember this. It is for your benefit here. Step away from them and transform who you're dealing with. Now, this could cause the way, of course, that you relate to people to change pretty drastically. And of course, some relationships will either need to change or they will need to go. This won't be the worst for all of this isn't going to be every relationship that you have, probably. I mean, it could be, but probably not, And there are going to be some surprises for you when it comes to broader groups. So you may see some dynamics that play out on a personal level for you that you're then able to see play out on a broader scale here with Uranus in the 11th, and it may make you look at groups of people and society and the way that all of that functions quite differently in a pretty sharp way over the course of a pretty short period of time, where you won't see society and groups of people and so forth quite the same way as you were looking at them before. I think with a bit of rose-colored glasses before. And it can also, this isn't just it's not just a bad thing, this is necessary, and it's healthier the way that you are dealing with people and the way that you're seeing things going forward. So I do really want to emphasize that this is for your benefit, without a doubt. With Uranus in the 11th, you may also see additional new affiliations, associations, groups that you're involved with and so forth arise within your life. They may kind of come and go. There may be kind of fits and starts about this. You may try many different types of groups and see which ones you might want to stick with more long term. But I feel like you may actually encounter several maybe in a row that you kind of, it's just like a short period of time that you're dealing with them. Because the social group that's around you, essentially, broadly speaking, it's unstable, it's changing, it's evolving, and so it's getting to someplace healthier, but there's a major emphasis on a shift and a change and a transformation with regard to the people that you're dealing with during this time. Now, with this all interacting with Neptune in the 9th, I see that whatever you're learning about other people and about society and the way that all of those kind of group dynamics and interpersonal dynamics work is kind of making you question your worldview and kind of shift your philosophy, like religiously, politically, ideologically, philosophically. Your worldview is actually, despite these shocks, it's actually softening a bit. So I do feel like there's a bit of increased compassion that you are developing due to whatever this change is and the way that it is reshaping your worldview and your philosophy. You may find that you're kind of desiring on a not overwhelming, but more of an undercurrent of kind of wanting to study certain topics, possibly religious topics or philosophy, throughout this time as well. And that is well indicated here. So again, your worldview, your philosophy, it's softening. It's becoming a little bit more spiritual throughout this time as well. And I think a way that's really healthy and that is more beneficial than what you came into this time with. I think these are really wonderful lessons that are coming through for you. And again, with Jupiter in the first house, you should find yourself quite popular during this time, especially with this being in Leo and with Leo rising. You should find that you're coming off in a way that is making people react in a very pleasant and helpful way toward you. You're being taken well, essentially. What you're doing is coming off well. And so you may find that there are some benefits that come to yourself based on the way that you are presenting. And you may even wind up finding that you want to share some of this information that you are learning with others throughout this time too, that you may want to teach it somehow. And that is also really well indicated here. That would be a really good way to channel and funnel some of this energy here. So that, I think, is most of what I have for you, Leo. Do keep in mind, Jupiter's in your first. So a lot of things that you're wanting, you're going to get during this time, and lean into that. Try not to, other than potentially manipulative situations, don't question yourself too much. Also, with Pluto in the 7th and Jupiter in your first, if you feel like you're getting gaslighted, go with it. Feel that and know that it's true, and don't question yourself about that, because that's probably a big part of the lesson with Jupiter in the first as well. So that is what I have for you. It should be an interesting time. I know that I made it probably seem a little heavier than it is because I'm mentioning lessons and stuff like this, but the whole purpose of all of this is to kind of change your view on society and your place in the world and how you feel like other people perceive you, and worrying about what other people think, and susceptibility to any sort of gaslighting and things like this. This is all crystallizing your own confidence within yourself and your compassion with groups of people in a way that is really meant to play out right now. So it's actually, this is all working for you really, really well here. Okay, so for Virgo rising here, what we will be dealing with is Uranus will be in your 10th house, Neptune will be in your 8th house, and Pluto will be in your 6th house. And what this indicates also, we will deal with Jupiter in your 12th house as well. But what this all kind of indicates is that you are changing the way that you go about your work and your career. You may change jobs, which will put you on a different career path here. So for instance, this could be changing jobs in order to make time for pursuits which will enable you to realign your career. So possibly relying more on what you consider to be a job so that you are able to change what you consider to be your career or your purpose in life. Try not to play it safe or give in to any sort of fear with Neptune in the 8th here. This can come through as a a low grade, kind of under the radar bit of fear or anxiety at certain times, especially when changes are going on. So try not to give into that too much. And again, try not to play it too safe, because what I see here is there's a bit of a tendency to kind of cling to what you know. It's like the ego is really wanting to hold on to like the devil you know. It's like there's something about your job and your career that you're not satisfied with or that could be improved, and that is improving through this time. Now, this could also play out even as a kind of promotion with Uranus in the 10th house here, and this would probably lead you to do a lot more work and to feel a lot more beholden to the tasks. And so you may feel a little bit stifled when it comes to details and stuff, but Pluto in the 6th is so good with details, and that should really please your Gemini rising here. You should be really sharp, really on point when it comes to any sort of dealing with data or information or facts or anything like that. And also if you have to do research or really dig into something really intensely, then that's really favored by this, because little things shouldn't be overlooked during this time by you. One thing I really want to emphasize here is it's clear with these transits that something is supposed to change. So again, don't give in to any sort of fear of regret or a fear of a lack of solid ground to stand on, because you will find that, you will have it, but these changes really need to be made, considering this is affecting your house of work and your house of career. So definitely don't give in to the fear. Don't not make these changes, because the thing is, if you try to not make these changes, you're going to get pushed, and you're going to get pushed pretty hard, because it's so clear what the planets are trying to tell you with this. So if you resist, you're going to get pushed, by these planets. So with Jupiter in the 12th, you may be learning a lot about synchronicity. You may be receiving the encouragement that you're needing in order to feel safer as you make these changes from these kind of spiritual or ethereal sources. And this could even be through an established religion that you believe in, through some sort of scripture or something. So if you are needing a sense of comfort through the changes that are being made here, then do try and rely on your sense of spirit, and also rely on synchronicity. If you're scared of any sort of change that's going on, ask for signs, and you're going to get them with Jupiter in the 12th house. But yeah, that's most of what I have for you. Again, try not to be scared of anything that's spiritual. If you do, get scared, then just, Palo Santo and sage and so forth. But with Neptune in the 8th here, and also with Jupiter in the 12th, there can be more of a connection even than maybe you're comfortable with spiritual sources. So it's just, try not to worry about that too much, and just try and make sure that you always have some sage or Palo Santo just for your own peace of mind on hand. Okay, so for Libra Rising, we have Uranus in the 9th, we have Neptune in the 7th, and we have Pluto in the 5th here, and we'll also be getting into Jupiter in the 11th here a little bit as well. So what's changing here is your close relationships and your attitude toward romantic relationships. It's fitting since we're talking Libra Rising. But there may be an increased focus on romance or romantic themes, and your style and your tastes may even reflect this. One thing I do want to recommend is to not over-idealize romantic partners during this time, in particular because of Pluto in the 5th house here. There can be a level of unbalanced power dynamics as well as manipulation within the context of romantic relationships or within the context of intimacy. there's a potential to become married under this transit, or to have some sort of developments within your romantic relationships. But I would recommend taking your time and making absolutely sure that it's the best thing for you before signing any contracts at all during this time. With Neptune in the seventh house, that's very important, is make a habit of reading contracts really thoroughly, because there can be deception or overlooking things when Neptune is in the seventh, specifically with regard to contracts and so forth. With Uranus in the ninth here, there can be a kind of deepening of your ideology, your worldview, your philosophy, and there may be some changes, of course, with respect to all of this. But I kind of more so also see this as becoming rather more ideological than before. So I would recommend try not to become too dogmatic, because you could encounter some kind of surprising pushback if that happens. But I do see that you're becoming stronger in your worldview. So there's something about a level of certainty that you are coming into, which is kind of fascinating. That's more so coming through intuitively, because Uranus can represent uncertainty, but I actually feel like Uranus is less a matter of uncertainty than a matter of upheaval. And when Uranus makes a change, or when Uranus is considering something, it is certain. It's full on certain. And that's why it goes, balls to the wall right away, That's why you get sudden changes out of it. And so there can be a sharpness with this. And with that being in your worldview, you may become more progressive, but you could also become a little bit more dogmatic in a progressive worldview that you have here. So just something to kind of keep in mind there. Now, you could also be utilizing technology for learning and have some benefit come to you out of that as well. With Jupiter transiting the 11th around 2026, 2027, you should be able to benefit strongly from your affiliations, from your associations, from friends and so forth, from your ability to network with people. And this should protect you from a lot of different aspects. One thing is, I would recommend with these transits, especially in the beginning, if you feel a little bit weird about something that's going on in a romantic context, I would talk to friends about it, because they'll be able to help you in a meaningful way to see whether something that's going on is healthy or not, with Neptune and Pluto in your houses of kind of personal romantic relationships. You could also get a major leg up with regard to any aspect of your life that you're wanting to develop here, with Jupiter in the 11th, and also from any groups that you join or any kind of associations that you create during this time are really beneficial to you. So kind of try and make it an intention during these couple years to socialize as much as possible, to grow your social group, because that'll only benefit you as long as you're keeping your head on straight about things. So that's mostly what I have for you for this coming time. It looks actually really pleasant. The only drawback here really is any sort of dogmatism, and making sure that you're really seeing things clearly within the context of romantic relationships. Otherwise, it looks quite good. Okay, so for Scorpio Rising, let's move this ahead. All right, so this is an interesting combination. We have Uranus in the 8th house, we have Neptune in the 6th house, and we have Pluto in the 4th house, and we'll also discuss Jupiter in the 10th house as well. Now, one minor topic that I want to mention as well is that this could indicate some level of inheritance. And again, I don't really want to worry you about that. It's just something I should mention with Uranus in the 8th and Pluto in the 4th here. Now, there may be some periodic issues that kind of arise within the workplace, or related to task work or your health where there may be some misunderstanding, or in the case of a workplace where you may be kind of deceived on some level. This might not be intentional. So one thing is, I would definitely recommend, if you get any sort of strange diagnosis or anything during this time, I would get a second opinion without a doubt. It might not be what someone initially sees. Additionally, if you perceive the work that you do to be more of a job than a career, you may be trying to figure out throughout this time what might be the best fit for your purposes. You may feel kind of more comfortable in a situation where you're less micromanaged and have more time to zone out at work and to not have to be just like on point all the time with Neptune in the sixth house here. And again, with regard to this planet being in the house of health, I don't want to worry you. I would just say any sort of thing that you hear or anything like, try not to be a hypochondriac, but also get a second opinion on anything that comes up, because it's probably not as intense as it seems. So with Pluto being in the fourth, there is some fundamental aspect of your life that I kind of feel like might at some point during this time almost being kind of held over your head here. And this could play out in a living situation, or it could play out within the case of a family. And this would probably, or a marriage, it could play out where if someone makes more money than you do, then they might be somehow controlling you through that. And with that in mind, with Uranus in the eighth, I would be a little bit careful about taking on debts, but you might find yourself in the position where you feel the need to do so. I wouldn't say don't take on debts, but I would just be as mindful as possible about that as you can. During the beginning of this transit, you may have found some sort of, sorry, that's my cat playing with cabinets, of course. You may find some sort of purpose that is really important to you that you want to pursue. And I would, with the opposition to Pluto here, I would caution to allow any criticisms or negativity or any control over that situation from family or those that you live with. If someone is naysaying within that context, I would really caution you to not really listen to them. And that's a little bit of like, if there's pushback that you can't tolerate from someone in your living situation, that's where I'm seeing a potential for, okay, I might need to, take out a loan or ask someone for a favor with regard to borrowing some money in order to get myself into a different living situation or something. Something like that might pop up during this time. But what's more important is that you not allow this to convince you not to pursue whatever this new purpose or goal that you have is, because this is really important. It's Jupiter in the 10th. Like this, whatever this is that's arising to you as a purpose is beneficial to you, and it is real. It's very real. This specific kind of situation is where I could see someone choosing to take on some level of debt in order to pursue the growth and potential that Jupiter is implying here. But do kind of keep it in mind. Just kind of try and think about it. It won't be necessarily a forever debt because it's Uranus. You may find that you're able to pay it back faster than you would expect, but it'll be there and it'll probably annoy you a little bit. So that's mostly what I see. I do see that if you're looking to make ends meet, and you're looking for like little side jobs or something like that, I would aim for something that allows for you to zone out while you do it. That's one thing that I will mention here without a doubt. Okay, let's switch this to Sagittarius Rising. Okay, so for Sagittarius Rising, we have Uranus is in the 7th house, Neptune is in the fifth house, and Pluto is in the third house, and we will also discuss Jupiter in the ninth house here. This is pretty lovely here. I like this, actually, the more that I look at it. So this kind of alignment here is all about personal expression within your relationships. It's an excellent time to teach yourself not to hold back with regard to your thoughts and your feelings on behalf of other people. So don't hold yourself back because of how you think that people will pursue you, and that's a big lesson that is kind of being emphasized here. So people will come and go with Uranus in the seventh house here, but you and your expression should be free within the context of your own life here, and there's an increased ability to also focus on minute details that build a broader picture. So research should be pretty easy for you during this time. But you may also hear, this is all with Pluto in the third house, you may also hear things that disturb you a bit during this time. So you may find yourself more sensitive to, for instance, media that used to not bother you. It may really rub you the wrong way. And you may learn more about things like body language and charisma as well. And so there's a lot of learning about dynamics, power dynamics, and so forth, with Pluto in the third house, and a major ability to focus, which is always, in my opinion, very nice. So with Neptune in the fifth house, we do want to be really careful not to overindulge, especially in any sort of toxic substances or whatnot. And also to try not to be deceived or manipulated when it comes to friends and casual partners. And during this time with Neptune in the fifth and Uranus in the seventh, like I said, there might be some kind of important relationships that kind of suddenly end, but this will be natural and it's making room for new ones to arise. So additionally, with Jupiter in the ninth, this is awesome, especially for Sagittarius Rising. I mean, geez Louise. So, because we have this, it's tripling basically your energy here, which is really nice. Now, you should be quite comfortable with your own worldview during this time. It'll probably be broadening. You're probably going to be pulling in, and I don't feel like this is in a cognitive bias way, but I feel like your own personal worldview is and my cat has stuff to say as well. Your own personal worldview will be kind of confirmed by a lot of the stuff that you're learning. So you're developing your worldview and it's growing, and you are growing through philosophical learning, through really any sort of education, but really focused on taking a worldview that is a lot broader. So this could be even aha moments where you run across a certain philosopher where you've always felt vaguely in a certain way, and then you run across a philosopher that speaks about what it is that you've been feeling for a while, and you're like, oh man, like I have on a kind of low level, a almost subconscious level, I've really believed this for a long time, but I never really knew how to articulate it. And now I understand the context of it all, and I understand how to articulate this. This can be one of those kinds of influences here where your own personal sense of the world is really growing and thriving. You may also find yourself traveling during this time, and if you do, especially when it comes to long distance travel, the only issue that could arise would be Pluto here, and we'll get into that in a second. But this should represent a strong protection for you through that. So if you do long distance travel, you should be relatively safe with regard to that. This is, though, opposite to Pluto, which is in the third house. So the issues that arise for you when it comes to travel would be more along the local level. So try and make sure that all your ducks are in a row when it comes to documents and things like that. And I would say also when commuting, be careful about it. For instance, if you're commuting in another country, really be careful with your documents and stuff. Maybe try and keep them on your person rather than in bags or so forth, because that is where I could see any sort of issues coming in with regard to all of that. I think that that's pretty much what I have for you during this time, Sagittarius. I don't particularly know why my cat wants to talk to you guys in particular, but maybe that means something for you. But yeah, so that's what I have for you guys, Sagittarius. Okay, so for Capricorn, we have Uranus in your sixth house, Neptune in your fourth house, and Pluto in your second house, as well as we will cover Jupiter in your eighth house here. One theme that I see playing out here is possibly feeling the need to do more work, to take on more work, to make more money. And this could play out in a couple of ways. So let me go through maybe a couple examples. And it may play out in many ways, but I'm hoping that you can kind of, I can elucidate these themes a little bit through some examples. So for instance, you could potentially get some sort of promotion where you're making more money, but you're also working more. And you may not entirely like this. And the reason for this is you may feel beholden somehow to your income. So try not, if you can, to do work that you don't want to do simply because you feel it's more responsible to make more money. So try not to measure your responsibility in dollars, because that could get you kind of sucked into a bit of a situation that's a little difficult, but also paradoxically kind of less stable. Because, for instance, if you received a promotion and you're making more money, then you may feel like you are kind of, since you're costing the company more, that you have to work extra hard and you have to stay extra on the ball and do everything really according to how they want it, and where you're almost like micromanaging yourself on behalf of them, to earn this promotion, like this raise, essentially. So try not to project that onto the situation, because especially with Pluto involved, there can be a lot of projection involved here. So try to, if you do get a promotion, if you're feeling like almost a little weird about it, like you don't deserve it, do know that you were given that position because you did already earn it. And I wouldn't say work less, but maybe don't try not to micromanage yourself too much, because what that can wind up doing then is making it to where you feel the need to seek some freedom from your tasks and from your work. This could be like overworking yourself and not really enjoying yourself as much because you feel the need to go. Another thing that I want to point out, one is, of course, money has some sort of undue power over you during this time. And it's also aligned with Jupiter in the 8th here, so we'll go into that as well. But this could also represent needing to take on a job because you feel like, for instance, if you are involved with someone deeply where they somehow control your resources, there's a control over your resources and your resources controlling you. And so I could see that as a situation where there's, a breadwinner that provides you your resources, especially with Jupiter in the 8th. And those resources, because of the source of them, have some undue power over you, and that you may feel the need to break free from that. Now, with Neptune in the 4th here as well, if you're trying to deal with this situation, it might be worth kind of tapping into family or others that kind of feel like family to kind of see what they say. But if they're negative about it and their answer is that you should just kind of suck it up, you might want to question Uranus here a little bit about how much freedom you're needing to seek. But if you know your situation, so if this is an unhealthy dynamic here where you're feeling somehow indebted to someone because of the resources that they provide for you, and they are therefore exercising some sort of undue control over you that feels really stifling, Trust yourself on that. And if family is telling you otherwise, you may need to really question that as well, you know. Now, also with Neptune in the fourth, you may kind of get this sense of not knowing, not feeling like you don't know where you belong, or feeling like you don't know who your family is. And I would say kind of allow for this to play out. I know it's scary, if this is the situation that's playing out for you in particular, but it's trying to lead you to groups that are healthier for you. And there's also an important thing here about a transformation of your relationship with money and with your resources, to where you're seeing the power that they have over your life in a different way. And so if that means that some of those who are closest to you kind of will need to, either they themselves change, or the people that you're involved with, no longer being involved with some and being involved maybe down the line with some other people who are a little healthier, then that is, you know, how that has to play out. And that's what that's trying to lead you toward with all of this here. There is a sense of like seeking freedom through work here, and either through work or from work. And so that's going to be a strong theme throughout this time. You should be able to, some weird like little detail work that you have to do, it should go over relatively well. You will have a really keen and sharp eye for detail during this time as well. Additionally, a couple things that I want to point out early on with this transit through the 8th house. And Jupiter will move on out of your 8th house and into the 9th, and that'll be less heavy and a little bit more pleasant, but this is a protective energy. So issues surrounding debts and other people's resources, you are more protected than you might perceive yourself as being throughout this time as well. So I would try not to over worry about it. But with this here, there is a concern over debt. So, you know, if you can avoid it, then try not to take out loans or credit cards unless you're kind of fully aware of how that will play out. And I would also be a little bit careful about co-signing contracts with others. With both of these, I want to clarify, I'm not saying don't do that. I'm not saying don't take on debts, because again, this is a protective energy. And I'm also not saying don't co-sign. This may even be a situation where you're needing to change your living situation to get away from someone, and someone could potentially co-sign for you in order to get you into a different situation. And that could be protective and it could be really beneficial. It's just, you'll definitely want to put your mind on it. Think it through as you're doing it. And if something is such that it would give someone more power over you, with this dynamic between Jupiter and Pluto on this 2nd house, 8th house axis, I do want to clarify here. 2nd house is your resources and the resources that you're drawing from, your income and so forth. The 8th house is other people's resources and debts and so forth. So that's why I'm talking about this. With this axis here, it is just something you're definitely going to want to think through. But work can definitely, I don't want to be like, Arbeit macht frei or frei or whatever. Sorry, my German is pretty rough. Here, but there is a sense of getting some sort of freedom either from work or through work here, which should be helpful. And it should also, it'll probably be relatively of a kind of transient work situation, with Uranus in the 6th. You may also start freelancing with Uranus in the 6th as well, and that could be really beneficial to you. Additionally. So that's mostly what I'm seeing for you here. I know it's not like the most dynamic and fun, but I think that there's a major important transformation that's going on for you surrounding issues of your work and your resources, where your relationship to them is changing. And I think that the transformation of your relationship with those things is, in a healthy way, transforming other aspects of your life as well, such as your living situation and your family and so forth. So that is most of what I have for you here, Capricorn. All right, so for Aquarius Rising, we have Uranus in the 5th house, Neptune in the 3rd house, and Pluto in the 1st house. And we will additionally be addressing Jupiter in the 7th house during this 2026-2027 timeframe. So this is kind of one of the more interesting and dynamic placements. So it should be a pretty fascinating time for you. It won't necessarily be all perfect, but it will be productive in a way that relates fully to you as an individual. And this will be a period of great personal development, which will offer great highs at certain points as well. And so with Pluto in the 1st house here, you as an individual are transforming, and particularly with regard to how you present yourself to the world. One thing to keep in mind is that during this time, people may be more intimidated by you than normal. So if that's not in your interest within a given situation, do try and dial it back a little bit, dial back any sort of aspects of your personality, which could be kind of intimidating. And I know that that might not be the easiest thing for an Aquarius rising to do, but, you know, try and kind of consider ways that you might be able to do that in those situations so that you're prepared ahead of time. Otherwise, you should be discovering new strengths that you were previously unaware of. So entirely new aspects of yourself are kind of coming online at this time. With Neptune in the 3rd house here, you may find yourself immersed in a kind of new way of enjoying media, so new types of media, or a new way of enjoying the media that you always have. And if you're pursuing music, this is a really wonderful time to refine your skills with regard to that, because the 3rd house is going to deal with the refinement of this, and especially with regard to your voice or dexterity. But with this kind of beautiful Neptune here, that can play into areas of like music, or if you're making film, or if you are a writer. This is just a really perfect placement for this. The only thing is that in day-to-day communications, there may be misunderstandings, and these won't be malicious. This isn't, you know, I mean, Pluto's maybe a little bit involved here, but it's not, Neptune isn't always jerky. It's just, it misunderstands things sometimes because it overlooks the details. It totally loses the trees for the forest, you know. And so the details of something may get a little bit lost, but because it's in a detail-oriented house, when it comes to matters of Neptune, that's where you get the help of the details. So if you have, if you're a musician but you don't know how to read music, this might be a great time to learn those little more kind of detail-oriented, like little areas of focus with regard to these broader, more, you know, kind of illustrative, performative kinds of pursuits, you know. And again, you should be getting a lot of enjoyment out of it. Additionally, with Uranus in the 5th house, you'll experience, like I alluded to, some really awesome kind of highs of mood and enjoyment. And you may wind up making some of your favorite memories at this time. This isn't really about memory, but this is about having really good times. And I'm just saying, you'll probably look back on this time as probably some of the high points. This is what Uranus in the fifth house, geez Louise, Uranus in the 5th house is trying to point out here is these kinds of highs of enjoyment here. And there may be occasional times where you overindulge to extremes. So watch out for that a little bit, you know. Just try and keep that in mind, that there could be shocks to the system from things that you enjoy. So substances and things like this is basically what I'm alluding to here. So be careful about not overdoing it, you know, because there could be shocks that come out from that. I'm not saying don't do it. Could be really interesting experiences, but make sure you're measuring things correctly. Let me put it that way. Now, with Jupiter in the 7th in this 2026-2027 timeframe going into this new alignment of the planets, your personal relationships should be functioning really well. People should be taking you really well. You should be able to benefit from your friends quite a bit, and in a mutually beneficial way. You should also be able to benefit your friends quite a bit. Now, there's a group of people, probably even more people than before, that are highly supportive of you and especially your personal transformation here. Some may be, quote, opposed to it because it's a, quote, opposition. But when you have Jupiter making an opposition to something, it's still supportive. So there's not really any sort of real opposition that I'm seeing there. The absolute overall vast majority of that is going to be supportive. And your social life should really be thriving during this time. So you should be able to, if you come into this and it's a little bit surprising with Pluto in the first house, really lean into your confidence, because it's wonderful for you. And I think that Aquarius Rising will feel this in a bit more of a natural and welcome way, because you're fine with transformation. You're fine with like being pushed and shoved, not in the sense of like, no, you need to agree with me, but if fate starts to kind of pull and push you in certain ways, you can adapt to those things quite well, and it'll be exciting and novel for you. So I think that you are probably one of the best signs for Pluto to be moving through in terms of being really welcoming of what that transformation really implies for you. So this should be a really cool time for you. And I'm happy to see it playing out in this part of your chart in particular. But yeah, I think that that's pretty much everything I've got for you for now, Aquarius. Okay, so for Pisces Rising here, let's see here. We have Uranus in the 4th house, we have Neptune in your 2nd house, and we have Pluto in the 12th house. We will also address Jupiter in your 6th house here. This is definitely not the worst kind of placement, but I do want to kind of get something out of the way just off the top. In general, one specific way for some people that I could see this playing out would be a period that could bring a disruption in your family or your living situation, such that you would feel then financially destabilized and feel the need to take on additional work to make ends meet, and potentially needing then to rely on a level of spirituality to bring you through this. That's one very specific message that's coming through. And with that out of the way, let's move on to how this would more likely play out. So otherwise, you may actually feel like you don't fully understand your relationship to money, and this may actually be kind of interesting and cool. You may see about ways that you can kind of make cutbacks in order to be able to focus less on income in order to enjoy other pursuits more. And this should come somewhat naturally to you with Pisces Rising. I also have a lot of Pisces, and my relationship with money has always been, I'd much prefer to not have to worry about it, and I kind of see a bit of that energy here for you as well. Additionally, with Pluto in the 12th house, you're going through a kind of transformation spiritually, and that may play into all of this. Now, hopefully we don't see you over-isolating yourself or being isolated from the outside by some people within the context of your living situation. You may kind of feel a little bit restricted by where you're living, such that you wind up deciding to make a major move. And otherwise, this could be surprising additions or departures of people from your family. There's one major warning I do have about Neptune being in Aries here in general, not just for you, and that is, of course, the potential rise of cultish groups. Yours is just about the only sign where I could see that kind of playing out directly in the houses. And one way this could play out would be like an eccentric living situation, Uranus in the fourth house of the home. And that situation playing into you not feeling the need to pursue, income of your own, or to pursue your own personal resources. And then this bringing you into a situation where you are dominated within and isolated from others by the group itself. So dominated within a group or isolated from others by the group. Now, this could also play out. That's just a warning that I really want to put out there for you, just in case, This could play out in a healthy way. Let me kind of lay that out. So all of these things could play out where you could find yourself in an unconventional living situation where you don't really feel the need to earn a whole lot of money, and you're transforming your spirituality through it. So it doesn't have to take that kind of negative bent, but I do want to throw that, especially for Pisces Rising. Like I said, I've got a lot of Pisces, we're family here, and I want to make sure that you are forewarned and forearmed with regard to any sort of undue, kind of situation there. Now, with Jupiter in the 6th, you may find yourself being a bit of a busybody. This may mean that you take on additional work, tasks, projects. Now, detailed kind of study should go over well during this time, and your physical health should be really solid during this time as well. But I will say that in terms of the 12th can be a house of mental health as well. And that may be an area where you're wanting to do a deep dive. I would highly recommend a deep dive there, because Pluto's going to play out upon your mental health one way or the other. And one way you can use it effectively, rather than having it in control of the situation, is to probably look into a lot of, just read up. Basically, you could go to school for this if you wanted to, but you could even just read up on psychoanalysis and, kind of Jungian thought on psychology and so forth, and then just kind of basically bring that all on board for yourself and kind of, psychoanalyze yourself a bit here and be open to that, so that Pluto doesn't have the upper hand, and so that you're utilizing Pluto in the 12th rather than allowing for Pluto in the 12th to be affecting your mental health, So again, in terms of spirituality, if you are in charge of your own spirituality, if you're not leaving it up to a group, for instance, to define for you, then you should be very much in charge of that transformation and be able to make that in a really healthy way. But either way, this is a period of time where I see you're almost kind of distancing yourself from the material world, in terms of like the corporate kind of material world where we think like, okay, working 9 to 5, blah, blah, blah. That to me doesn't really look like something that you're caring about here. I think that you are looking more at yourself as rich in spiritual resources, rather than worrying about, the whole, what your paycheck is saying about you, So yeah, that is most of what I have here. Again, emphasizing your health should be quite protected during this time. You should be feeling pretty strong in your body. Detail-oriented work, really solid for that. Study is definitely favorably implied here as well. So again, this psychological study is really, really well aspected here in terms of going deep and then studying it and looking at all the details and everything. This is really, really great. And yeah, I do see there's a change in the living situation, without a doubt. It's either with regard to the family, or you're moving for one reason or another. And you may also find yourself within an eccentric living situation throughout this time as well. But yeah, that is pretty much what I have for you, Pisces, during this time. and therefore what I have for all of the signs. If you guys did enjoy this, please do feel free to give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. It helps me out with the algorithm and helps my little channel to grow. And yeah, I am very, very grateful for all of that. And it also lets me know that you enjoyed this video, which means a lot to me as well. And yeah, otherwise, if you like these broad topics of these long-term transits and kind of world astrology topics, then do hit the subscribe button and stick around for future videos. I really appreciate that as well. And yeah, other than that, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful time. I hope that these long-term transits treat you super well. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day as well. Bye.